Are you good, Ryan? Okay, cool. Okay, so we have Maria Otsuka and Roel Roscam Abbing who will present Low Tech Magazine. Please welcome them.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all for coming, and thank you, Erica and Sarah, for organizing Radical Networks and Spektrum for hosting us. So this is our project, Low Tech Magazine. Before I kind of dive into this website, I was just going to talk a little bit about the background behind this. So, well, first, my name is Maria Otsuka. I'm currently working as a type designer at this foundry called Occupant Fonts in Rhode Island, Providence. It's the smallest state in the United States. And I was involved with this project actually when I was still a student at RISD. My friend Lauren Traugott Campbell and we received a grant to work with Krista Decker, who is the writer of Low Tech Magazine. And for me, it was sort of an interesting project to work on because I was curious about what like a low-tech website might look like. And a lot of my work has been focusing on trying to make, coming from like a designer's perspective, making the design sort of expose the way it was made in a certain sense, like expose the medium in a way, and having it be like transparent basically to the infrastructures that is behind. So this making a low-tech website designed in a way that makes it look low-tech was something I was very curious about.
Hi everyone, my name is Roel. I was also one of the collaborators on this project. I guess it happened a bit by accident. I knew Chris from Low Tech Magazine through mutual connections, and then at some point I met with Marie and Lauren working on this redesign, and then basically together with Chris, we really started to think of like if this website of Low Tech Magazine needs to be redesigned, then how should we do it? And myself, I have a background in arts, working a lot on networks and infrastructures and DIYing, and I'm part of a few artist-run organizations. One's called Varia in Rotterdam, which is a collective space or a space for collective approaches to technology. And I'm a member of the Homebrew Server Club, which is basically figuring out self-hosting and making your own online presence together with each other. So it's like a learn together kind of thing. And both of these practices have been quite influential for me. So Low Tech Magazine is like, by now I think it's almost a decade old, and the website shows. I guess when Marie approached Chris to think about redesign, he was like, oh yeah, that's actually quite apt. It has a huge readership, actually, and a very dedicated one. So it's really an interesting magazine in the sense that it's really a conversation that goes on in each article. And so the idea of Low Tech Magazine is basically to propose this idea of low tech, which is looking at historical examples that can give us an idea how people used to employ technologies in the, let's say, the pre-fossil fuel abundance, and how rather than trying to solve a lot of the problems of technology with even more technology and high technology with all its externalities on the environment and on people, it's trying to learn from history how we could use low tech in a way. And so the blog is a lot of research and very long in-depth articles on a variety of topics, from heating to mechanical power transmission to transportation, and recently Chris also started writing about the internet as one of the, let's say, one of the main growing sources of energy consumption globally, basically, and also trying to imagine what low-tech internet could be like. Obviously, this then leads to a lot of comments on his website. So if you're so low-tech, why do you have a website? Which I think kind of misses the point of low-tech. But that made it then the question, so yeah, what can a low-tech website be? And that's basically the point of departure for all of us to start this redesign.
Yeah. So what is a low-tech website? And I think there have been some previous examples that some of you may have been familiar with. One answer might be this motherfucking website. It's literally just plain HTML. There's no styling, no images. I mean, it's satire, but it's sort of a manifesto, right, on what a website can be. And then there was actually another version of this, an even better motherfucking website, which adds a little bit more styling, makes things a little more readable. And there's actually an even better, it keeps going on, but we don't need to go through all of them. So our sort of version of this looks like this right now, but we're really thinking about making a website that is both functional but also serves as like a manifesto and a proposition of what a low-tech website might be. And something we were looking at in terms of trying to find a way to make a really low power website that can be self-hosted is making things lightweight and efficient, obviously, but not necessarily focusing purely on just making something super efficient, just because there's this paradox called Javon's paradox where when you make something efficient, people actually use it more, and so it doesn't necessarily offset the fact that you've made it more efficient. So instead of really just making something more efficient to pump more megabytes, to really just focusing on kind of changing our behaviors and our expectations to use less megabytes, basically, to use less energy.
For this low-tech website, we were thinking of a few things. Part of the manifesto is that we really wanted for Low-Tech Magazine to self-host their thing, also to go into this process of demystifying, if I need a website, do I need a WordPress, do I need a cloud, how do I connect these things, to in a way engage a bit with the kind of the simplicity of it. At the same time, wanting to self-host also brings a lot of kind of requirements for it. And then particularly the home office of Low-Tech Magazine in Barcelona is partially off the grid. And that's also a bit how the author Chris researches how you can adjust your consumption to the supply, basically, of energy. So he said, one of the things that we should have is also have this website on solar energy to the extent that is possible, because a website requires, let's say, a whole network behind it. So that really created some, let's say, design limitations for us, where it needed to be really low power, very low maintenance, and we had to deal with the fact that the solar energy isn't always available. And let's say, without massively upscaling the amount of gear that you put around your website, so more solar panels, more batteries, or we've had suggestions to distribute copies of the hardware around the world so you have sun everywhere. So without duplicating, let's say, the capital requirements and their externalities, we said, let's just challenge this idea of uptime. So that it can be offline, and that's okay. And we can actually work with our design, telling people, it will be offline at some point, just so you know. And so, taking all these considerations into account, really the advantages that it gave us is that it became super lightweight, which means it's supported by much older machines. It works really well on slower networks. It can handle a lot of traffic. So it's if you start designing in that way you get a lot of benefits from it. So maybe Marie can talk a bit through the various design elements.
So there are a couple things that are a little bit unusual about the design of this website. But first, in sort of approaching Chris with the redesign, he at that point didn't really have like a typical design identity of sorts, and so thinking about what an identity for Low Tech Magazine might be, we ended up going with sort of a no identity, like no logo, but really just looking at a way to distinguish Low Tech Magazine with this typographic move of using the arrow as the hyphen instead of a normal hyphen. And this can be displayed in any kind of typeface. It doesn't have a strict form, but because there isn't really an image or like a specific vector form for the logo, that kind of asset doesn't need to be distributed anywhere. It can just be whatever typeface people have on hand. And that also talks about the default fonts that are available to us. So every website, usually there is a specific font that's specified in the styling of it so that it displays with that particular font. But behind that, there's always a browser default font which displays. And this website just uses that browser default font. And it's actually something that people can change in their settings. Like if I go into my settings here, go into fonts and colors. Right now, my default is Times, but if I change it to Arial, that's going to be what shows up on the website. So not only does it really like expose the fact that the browser is a big part of what you see online, it also gives the users more flexibility of like how they want to read this content. And then another design element here is you'll notice this bar in the background of the website. This bar corresponds to the battery meter, which I hope you all can see. But I think right now, actually, if I refresh, what's going on? So we're at 14% battery. And it's charging because it's sunny right now in Barcelona, I think. That way, I mean, this sort of element has been a little bit contested amongst the readers. They're like, it's super distracting. Well, like we should have a way to turn it off. But I think the whole point of this project was so that like people are aware that they're always consuming energy. Like this bar is really kind of symbolizing the relationship between the power supply of the weather and the power demand of the users coming to see this website. So it's something where we feel like it's like part of the content of the website that is important to display all the time. Also another feature that's embedded in here is print styles, where if you do decide to print this website, what you end up getting is a pretty styled print document as well. And you might think, like printing might be less sustainable, but a lot of readers do, especially like academics, they do print the website and they annotate it, and sometimes that's actually a more sustainable way of consuming content instead of like online where you're distracted by other ads, you keep going into other tabs, you're like restricted to that document that you printed and you can focus on it. So we were like, if people are going to print it anyway, we should make it something that maximizes the size of the page and is very legible and is like something you may keep around as a resource. So, but actually the first version of this website actually looked a little bit more like this, with no images. It was just like a list of, it was kind of closer to those earlier websites that I displayed. But we needed to sort of figure out a way to put images back in, because it is such a big part of how Chris designs his articles too, with the images being really like explanatory of what's happening. So what came in there was the dithering plugin that Roel developed.
Yeah, so one of the things in this redesign and porting from the old website to the new one is that well, it's a 10-year archive of articles, and especially the earlier articles, they're mostly image rather than text. So, like obviously, this sort of super lightweight thing to do would be to say, well, there's no images, but it's really part of the actual, well, the whole attractiveness and the story and the information of the website. But with all these articles, there's like around 400 megabytes worth of images. So we were looking at ways in which we could start to reduce this also because we were hosting it from the home connection of the author. But also to just reduce the size of that because the less you need to transfer and the less you need to store, basically the less energy you will use. And so then we started looking a bit at historic image compression techniques, also from this idea of learning from the past and combining that with new technologies. And so we came across this image compression called dithering, which is a way of simulating color depth with less colors. So it's a bit like half-toning in print technique, where you only have a few colors at your disposal, and then by sort of mixing them together, you create the illusion of more color or more depth. So, and there are some programming libraries that allow you to do these kinds of things. So I basically sort of duct-taped plugin for the system we were using together that would recompress all the images into a dithered version. So this is an example of one of the images from the blog. And then this is, for example, how it would look if you would reduce the amount of colors in that image to, I think this is just black, or it's dark gray, light gray and white. And then you get a lot of this visual artifacts. So a lot of the literature on dithering and image compression is, like how to get rid of that. But actually, I find it super beautiful, to be honest. And the fact that it's already there, and that's really sort of a design advantage. Because it's already that dithered, we can basically do the thing that everybody told you never to do, is to have really small images and just display them like at 200, 300, 400% of their original size, because it will work anyway. So yeah, we made a plugin that basically processes all these images, and we went from let's say 280 megabyte to I think 30.
Yeah, and kind of to add to that, I think a lot of readers have sort of commented on the fact that like some of the images may not necessarily be the most compressed in PNG dithered format, which is true, but or like JPEG might be better for certain cases. But something we want to highlight that is like we wanted to do this dither effect because it's very clearly compressed. Like we don't necessarily want to hide the fact that it's compressed. Like we want people to be aware that images need to be compressed to be lightweight, and how we should be aware of the size and the footprint of these images. Okay.
So you want to talk a bit about the ecosystem? Yeah.
Okay. So to kind of like backtrack a little bit and talk a little bit more about the whole process, this diagram kind of gives a general overview of what's happening with this website. So first, we have our power supply coming from the sun in Barcelona, and the solar panels installed in Chris's apartment. Literally, like it's on his balcony outside, and that power is a battery. It charges a battery, but when it's on, it directly powers the server, which is an Olimex mini computer. And then that's connected to a router, which gives us the website on our browsers when people access. And then in terms of the making standpoint, there's our content management system, which we use Pelican. And we're using some version control as well to try to coordinate between like Roel, who's in Rotterdam, I'm in Providence, and Chris is in Barcelona. So there's that. But basically, to kind of dive into this a little bit. What Pelican does is it basically converts a bunch of files into a static site. It's called a static site generator, but what that looks like...
For browsing?
I think that would be fine.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is kind of what Pelican looks like. There's some folders with content, which has all of the posts and the images that Chris kind of picks out for each article. And you'll notice that all of these images together, as is quite large. It's like 280 megabytes. Once dithered, all of these images look like this. They're all kind of black and white. But now that's 34 megabytes, so that's like a huge amount of megabytes that we were able to compress with the dithering. But this basically has all of the content, and then there's the theme files that sort of pull together that content. So there's some templates for each kind of page, and there's some of the JavaScript and the styling in there. And then there's the plugins. And so what it outputs is literally just a bunch of HTML files that is directly transported into the server space. And what's really useful about this format is that all of these markdown files, which are basically text, become a really useful archive for Chris too. And it's a very different process than what he used previously, which was TypePad. So he actually didn't have any copies of his own articles on his own computer, because he would just like compose on TypePad and keep them on TypePad. So if something happened to TypePad, he would basically lose like 10 years of his work. So having Markdown as a format for him to compose articles was a way for, like, the process inherently makes him have a local copy, basically. And also Markdown is a format that is really portable. Like, it can be converted into PDFs. It can be used in other systems. So that was also something that was an added benefit. Yeah. And then another feature here would be with Pelican is that it's able to generate the RSS feed, right?
Yeah, I can really briefly talk about it. So this whole idea of low tech is basically that you start to rediscover what happened in the past and how good, like, let's say, a lot of old stuff can be. So this website, for example, it's nothing than, plain old HTML. And then we were thinking of, we need some kind of offline archive, and how are we going to deal with that? How are we going to distribute that? And then basically you encounter like RSS, and you're like, wow, that's actually so well made for that for that purpose. So we published the entire website as an RSS feed as well that people can subscribe to. And your feed reader will download the entire website, which means that once the website is offline, you'll have your own copy to read at your own leisure. And so basically, just really briefly about the hardware. Also on that side, there's not so much exciting going on. It's just like a very well configured web server that takes a bit of, well, it's basically a lot of knowledge which is already floating around. And so it's a small Linux board using just a web server on it, nothing more. And then, you have all this sort of common wisdom of people saying like, well, compress your images, make sure you use caching, these kind of things. So we're just applying all of that. Led us to be able to host this website like really easily in this way. And so this whole project is a bit intended both as a proposition but also a question to the audiences. Like we did it this way, and we do public research basically, which is something that Chris is also doing. So we have across different websites, we have, so this is on the website of the Homebrew Server Club. It goes a bit more into the web server configuration. Marie has some articles on how you could do some of the front-end stuff. And obviously, Chris himself has the whole article called How to Build a Low-Tech Website. So, yeah. And this is also a way really of inviting, let's say, contributions from the readers and also from new readers on what can we improve, what have we overlooked, what are some other configurations possible. Keeping in mind though that this project is in a way a propaganda project. Like we've had a lot of comments saying like, well, using a shared host is probably more energy efficient. Yeah, but then you need to demystify what a shared host is. So this obviously, the way we all set it up wouldn't apply to anyone at the same time. Maybe you can show the stats. So it's also not a toy project. Like it's really, Chris's readership is huge. So you can see since the 2 weeks we launched, we got 150,000 unique visitors. And the whole website pulled it off with ease, like even the really big peaks of traffic. So there's really an advantage in working in this super lightweight way. And in a way, this magazine is really a good test case to, let's say, play around with these kinds of optimizations with also, quite some substantial traffic that allows you to test all these things. So with that, we would actually like to end and maybe do a reverse Q&A where maybe we have some questions and maybe some people in the audience can help us with some suggestions. Like also all the articles that we wrote, they end up with questions basically and calls for help and whatnot. So one question would be like how to make this sustainable in the economic sense. Like we really were pushing Chris to get rid of his ad system because all his blogs are basically run on Google AdWords and whatnot. Which also takes a lot of traffic and weight and whatnot. So the new website has no ads whatsoever, and we're kind of relying a bit on sponsorship and these kinds of things. But if people have more suggestions on how you could make this kind of public research economically sustainable in the longer run, that would be interesting. And we're looking for a way to add comments to a static website, which is a bit like, well, it's a bit impossible in a way. But there must be some kind of low-tech way, perhaps involving email, that we could work with.
I mean, right now, the way comments work right now is people are literally sending emails to solar@lowtechmagazine.com, which actually has been interesting in the sense that the sort of the content of the comments definitely change once you change it to an email format, and I think for the better. So there's, I think, some interesting things to play with there, but it's still sort of a very manual process for then that to be, that literally needs to be pasted into the markdown files. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, for sure. So does anyone have any questions? Okay.
Well, it's more a comment. The web server is in Barcelona, no?
Yes.
Yeah.
In Barcelona, we have a community network. So we have now the solar energy that is stored in a web server. And next step is to expand the network, the connectivity, the issues about the connectivity. So in Barcelona, it's great because we have like 2 technologies deployed, 2 architecture ways of doing the thing. So you can explore on that. You can also explore about putting these solar nodes in the different hopes of how you reach the web server. Okay, the internet part probably is not interesting because it's somehow obfuscate because it works. It's difficult to know, but inside this community network, you can know exactly what is the path you are reaching to go to. So there's a lot of interesting research about that. So I think this is the next step, very interesting probably. And if you need help, the project in Barcelona is Giphy.net. Yeah, this is.
Yeah, I mean, I would say. I would say it's probably best to contact Chris directly, and I think he's already been talking with some people that knew about Giphy and have been telling him about it, and he's really interested in having a node which would, let's say, be the uplink for this. So I think that that would be a nice next step, definitely.
Hi. So I have a comment about the topic of finances, right? So how to raise some money. Of course, one way which has come up in the past couple of years would be like to have these miners running in the browser. They consume a lot of energy, right? I don't think that's something you would consider. There's this other project, a European startup, I don't remember the name, it's something like Blendle, which basically uses a system of micropayments. So it's a little bit like Flutter. I don't know if you're familiar with how Flutter works or used to work, but you basically have some kind of balance, and then you have free access to the article, and then you kind of like decide how much you want to pay, or I don't know if the publisher can decide, but basically it kind of tries to eliminate the friction from the process, because that's one of the main issues with that. So if you would have to go to PayPal for every article, you would never do that. Yeah, that's something that comes to mind.
Do you want to respond?
No, I wrote it down.
Oh, you did? Okay. Okay, great. Well, then I guess we'll just end so we can try to get back on schedule here. So yeah, so thanks a lot.